Star Trek Nemesis 2002 wasn't just another Trek movie. It was a disaster from day one. The director had never seen a single episode and called LeVar Burton the guy with the eyes. Paramount released it 5 days before Lord of the Rings and lost $100 million.
A starship captain's life is filled with solemn duty.
And Tom Hardy's performance flopped so badly it nearly destroyed his mental health. These are 15 facts about the film that cut 45 minutes of soul, physically smashed miniature starships together, and ended with an open door that stayed closed for 18 years. Fact 1. The director who hated Trek scandal. Director Stuart Baird was brought on to Star Trek Nemesis, based on his legendary reputation as a film editor who'd worked on action classics like Lethal Weapon, Die Hard, and The Fugitive. But Baird had an absolutely catastrophic problem. He had never watched a single episode of Star Trek in any form and knew nothing about the franchise, characters, or established continuity. On his first day meeting the cast, Baird reportedly referred to LeVar Burton as the guy with the eyes, instead of calling him by his character name, Geordi LaForge. And he didn't know that Data was an android rather than just a weird human. The veteran cast was so deeply insulted by Baird's complete lack of basic research and respect for the material that Jonathan Frakes, who was an experienced director himself, eventually had to take over directing several smaller character scenes just to ensure the crew didn't behave like total strangers who'd never worked together before. The production became toxic and dysfunctional from the beginning. Fact 2. The suicide release date. Paramount Pictures made what Patrick Stewart later called a catastrophic mathematical error that cost them over $100 million in potential revenue. The studio chose to release Star Trek Nemesis on December 13, 2002, exactly 5 days before Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings. The Two Towers, one of the most anticipated blockbusters in cinema history. Nemesis was immediately and completely obliterated at the box office, becoming the lowest-grossing Star Trek film in the entire franchise's theatrical history up to that point. The film earned barely $43 million domestically against a $60 million production budget, making it a catastrophic financial failure. Patrick Stewart later remarked bitterly in interviews that Paramount had essentially sent us out to be slaughtered by the hobbits. See sacrificing Star Trek to clear the December schedule for the Lord of the Rings juggernaut. The suicidal release date doomed the film before audiences even had a chance to judge it on its own merits. Fact 3. Tom Hardy's darkness breakdown. A completely unknown 25-year-old Tom Hardy was cast as the villain Shinzon, Picard's younger clone, in what was supposed to be his big Hollywood breakthrough role. Hardy took the performance with absolute method acting seriousness, deliberately isolating himself from the veteran cast between takes to psychologically feel alien and disconnected from humanity. When Nemesis flopped catastrophically, both critically and commercially, and Hardy's performance was singled out for harsh criticism, he fell into a severe personal and professional spiral. Hardy later admitted in interviews that the enormous pressure of essentially carrying a Star Trek movie as an unknown actor, combined with the brutal rejection when it failed, nearly destroyed his mental health and made him question whether he should continue acting at all. It took Hardy several years and his transformative performance in Bronson to rebuild his confidence and reinvent himself as the serious dramatic actor we know today. Nemesis nearly ended his career before it started. Fact 4. The Argo Jeep controversy. The widely loathed sequence where Captain Picard drives a futuristic dune buggy called the Argo across a desert planet while shooting at enemies was not in the original screenplay. It was added specifically because Patrick Stewart is a passionate, real-life automobile and motorcycle enthusiast who explicitly demanded an action scene where he could really drive a vehicle at high speeds. The Argo was actually a fully custom-built off-road racing vehicle with a massively powerful engine that was so mechanically loud the actors had to wear industrial earplugs during filming to protect their hearing. This is why their dialogue in that entire sequence sounds like they're screaming at each other. They were genuinely shouting over deafening engine noise. Fans absolutely hated the dune buggy scene, calling it tonally inappropriate and accusing it of turning Star Trek into a cheap Fast and Furious knockoff. The sequence became symbolic of everything wrong with Nemesis's misguided attempt to be a generic action movie. Fact 5. The 45 minutes of missing souls. There's almost a complete hour of finished footage, approximately 45 minutes, that was shot, edited, and then cut from the theatrical release of Nemesis. These deleted scenes included a long, emotionally resonant goodbye dinner where the crew reflects on their decades together, and a scene at the wedding where Wesley Crusher, played by Will Wheaton, actually has dialogue and meaningful interactions instead of just standing silently in the background. Dedicated fans who've seen the deleted material argue passionately that the true soul of the movie, the character relationships and emotional closure, was deliberately left on the cutting room floor to make room for more generic ship-to-ship combat sequences and action beats. The theatrical cut prioritized spectacle over character, and the film suffered enormously from the loss of emotional depth. The deleted scenes reveal a much more thoughtful, melancholic film about aging and endings that was sacrificed for commercial considerations. Fact 6. Data's B4. Death Loop. Brent Spiner was actually the primary creative force who pushed for Data to die in Nemesis. Spiner felt he was getting visibly too old to continue playing an ageless android, and wanted a dramatic, emotionally resonant Spock-like, sacrificial exit for the character he'd played for 16 years. However, Paramount Studio executives forced the inclusion of B4, Data's simpler prototype brother, as a deliberate safety net in case they wanted to resurrect Data for future films. The existence of B4 with Data's memories potentially intact completely undermined the emotional weight of Data's sacrifice. Spiner later publicly regretted agreeing to the B4 subplot, saying it robbed Data's death of its finality and meaning. The character deserved a clean, permanent ending, but corporate hedging and sequel bait destroyed the dramatic impact. Fact 7. The Viceroy, prosthetic torture. Ron Perlman played the Reman Viceroy, Shinzon's monstrous second-in-command, under one of the most punishing makeup applications in Star Trek history. The full-body Reman prosthetics took 7 hours to apply every single morning before Perlman could even step on set. The thick, opaque Reman contact lenses that covered Perlman's entire eyes were so vision-impairing that he was effectively completely blind while in costume. During the climactic fight sequence where the Viceroy battles Commander Riker on a platform suspended over a bottomless pit, Perlman was literally swinging his fist blindly in Jonathan Frakes' general direction, and Frakes had to dodge the punches based purely on vibe and spatial awareness to avoid being genuinely hit by the future Hellboy actor. It was genuinely dangerous stunt choreography that could have resulted in serious injury, and it's remarkable that both actors emerged unscathed. Fact 8. The Thalaron radiation science. The horrifying Thalaron radiation weapon that Shinzon plans to use to genocide the entire population of Earth, depicted as turning living tissue instantly into calcified stone and ash, is loosely based on genuine theoretical physics concepts regarding microsingularities and exotic particle radiation. Right? The visual effects team used sophisticated cellular decay simulation software that was normally used for medical and biological research modeling to create the disturbingly realistic shots of bodies decomposing and turning into dust at the molecular level. It's one of the most scientifically grounded and genuinely gruesome death effects in Star Trek history, making the Thalaron weapon feel like a plausible weapon of mass destruction rather than just movie magic. The attention to biological accuracy made the threat feel more viscerally terrifying than typical science fiction superweapons. Fact 9. The Scimitar is a Nostromo ripoff. The visual design of Shinzon's flagship, the massive Reman warship Scimitar, was intentionally and explicitly modeled after the dark, claustrophobic, an industrial corridor aesthetic of the Nostromo spacecraft from Ridley Scott's Alien. The production designers wanted the Scimitar to feel like a haunted house in space, oppressive, shadowy, labyrinthine, and threatening, to create maximum visual and thematic contrast with the bright, clean, luxury hotel look of the Federation's Enterprise E. The design choice reinforced the film's themes about the Remans as an enslaved, brutalized underclass living in perpetual darkness. But it also made the Scimitar sequences feel generically horror movie rather than distinctively Star Trek. The borrowed aesthetic was so obvious that many reviewers explicitly noted the alien homage in their critiques. The Fact 10. The Wedding Guest Star Secret. The opening wedding scene between Commander Riker and Counselor Troi features cameo appearances from almost every major recurring character who'd appeared throughout the Next Generation's 7-season television run. If you look carefully at the background extras during the ceremony and reception, you can spot Guinan played by Whoopi Goldberg, various high-ranking Starfleet admirals, and other familiar faces from the show's history. Whoopi Goldberg reportedly agreed to do the brief cameo for SAG-scale minimum wage, essentially working for free, as a personal favor to Patrick Stewart, with only one condition. She absolutely refused to wear any of the silly hats or elaborate costumes that her character Guinan typically wore on the show. Goldberg just wanted to show up, support her friend, and leave without fuss or extensive makeup time. Fact 11. The Reman language is gibberish. Unlike Klingon, which is a fully constructed language with consistent grammar, vocabulary, and phonetic rules developed by professional linguist Mark Okrand, the Reman language spoken by the villains in Nemesis was completely invented by the actors on the day of filming with no linguistic foundation whatsoever. Director Stuart Baird gave the performers playing Remans the incredibly vague direction to just make sounds that sound like bats, leading to a series of improvised clicks, hisses, and guttural noises that had no internal consistency or meaning. The subtitle translators in post-production had to retroactively figure out what the random sounds were supposed to mean based on context and dramatic intent. It's a perfect example of Baird's lack of attention to world-building detail and his fundamental disrespect for Star Trek's tradition of creating believable alien cultures. Fact 12. The ramming speed miniature. The spectacular collision sequence where the damaged Enterprise deliberately rams the Scimitar at full impulse power was not created purely with computer-generated imagery. The visual effects team actually built two large-scale physical miniature models of both starships and literally smashed them into each other using a pneumatic hydraulic rig, capturing the destruction with high-speed cameras. It was the last time a Star Trek feature film used traditional physical miniature models for a major ship-to-ship collision before the franchise moved entirely to digital effects for all subsequent productions. The practical collision gave the impact genuine weight and physicality that CGI of the era couldn't quite replicate, and effects enthusiasts consider it one of the film's few unqualified visual successes. The destroyed miniatures were later auctioned to collectors for tens of thousands of dollars. Fact 13. The Suicidal Riker Subplot. In an early draft of the Nemesis screenplay, the climax was supposed to end very differently and much more tragically. Commander Riker was originally supposed to stay behind on the Scimitar to manually detonate the Thalaron weapon, sacrificing himself so that Captain Picard and Data could escape and survive. This would have been a devastating ending that killed off one of Star Trek's most beloved characters. The suicide mission was changed during rewrites because Jonathan Frakes was already contractually committed to direct the live-action Thunderbirds movie and didn't want his character to end on such a bleak, permanent note before he could potentially return to direct a future Star Trek film himself. Riker's survival allowed for the possibility of future appearances, though Nemesis's failure meant those opportunities never materialized in the expected way. Fact 14. The missing 2026 connection. There's an extremely easy-to-miss background detail visible on a medical computer screen in the Enterprise sickbay, a medical history file for Captain Picard that lists a scheduled synthetic heart replacement procedure update dated for May 2026. This was a deliberate continuity reference to the fact that Picard's original artificial heart, which he received as a young ensign after being stabbed through the chest in a bar fight, as established in the Next Generation episode Tapestry, would theoretically need periodic upgrades and maintenance as technology improved over decades. The specific 2026 date was chosen by the props department as plausible futuristic medical scheduling, though it's become another instance of Star Trek accidentally pointing to the mid-2020s as a significant time frame. The detail rewards eagle-eyed fans who know Picard's complete medical backstory. Fact 15. The final shot. Irony. The final shot of Star Trek. Nemesis shows Captain Picard walking out of his ready room and deliberately leaving the door open behind him as he exits. This was intentionally designed as a visual metaphor for a soft reboot and new beginning, because Paramount already had a fifth Next Generation film tentatively titled Star Trek: The Beginning in early development. The open door was meant to symbolize that Picard's story would continue and new adventures awaited. But because Nemesis flopped so catastrophically at the box office and killed the film franchise, that symbolically open door remained a literal dead end for 18 years, until the Picard television series was finally greenlit by CBS in 2020. The intended message of hope and continuation became an accidental monument to failure and the end of an era. So was Data's sacrifice a fitting end to 16 years of character development, or a total emotional ripoff undermined by corporate sequel insurance? Let me know in the comments if you think the Argo Dune buggy should be launched directly into a black hole and never mentioned again. If you want more deep dives into the movies that ended eras and broke hearts, hit that subscribe button and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.